Good morning. Everybody awake? You had an extra hour of sleep, so everybody should be wide awake. And we should have had extra people here this morning for Sunday school or for class time, for those of you who forgot. I don't normally forget, but I kind of forgot last night, and it was about midnight before I realized, oh, yeah, it's really only 11 o'clock, so I'm good. So anyway, good to see you all this morning. I want to start with just a few thank yous first. I'll tell you about this in just a second. Number one, thank you for being here. It was nasty weather this morning, right? And it was kind of dreary. Kind of wanted to just stay in bed and just sleep through the rain. But thank you for being here. And it looks like the sun's popped out, so it's going to be a great day. Number two, I want to say thank you. I don't think she's in here, but Sandra came up this Friday or Saturday and did some cleaning here for us and cleaned the bathrooms and did a lot of mopping upstairs, downstairs, and did a lot of work. And so I appreciate that. And I know the Colemans have come up here and have done that. And so I just want to say thank you for those who are pitching in and helping and doing those kind of things. And let's see. You might have noticed some extra color out front here. Did anybody notice the flowers? I did a great job, didn't I? Picking out flowers. No, I didn't do that. Jennifer Murphy came up yesterday, and she did some pressure washing. You may have noticed a little cleaner out front on the sidewalks in the front of the building, as far as she could reach, at least, and needs some little more work up a little higher. Did some flowers out front for us, so wanting to make the building look good and make it inviting. So thank her for doing that. When you see her, and there's a lot of places to get plugged in, a lot of places that you can do things and serve. And you just kind of want to ask, why do these people do this? Well, they're excited about their church. That's why they do that. They're excited about their relationship with God, and they want everyone to have a good experience when they come and see the building nice and clean and pretty, and that we care about the building because we care about God, we care about our relationship with God, and we want everyone to enjoy it. So there's a lot of things that can be done. This is a big building, so lots of places for you to get plugged in, lots of places to serve, and a lot of places that you're needed. So, but again, why do they do that? Because they're excited, and that's what we're talking about over this series called Yahweh. And before you'll be excited about your relationship with God, you've got to be excited about God first. That's how it works. You're not going to be excited about a relationship unless you're excited about the person you're in a relationship with. And so that's where we've got to begin, getting excited about God. If you're excited about the flowers out here, I mean, some people like landscaping, some people like doing that kind of stuff, and they're excited about the building. We have a nice building. God has blessed us with a beautiful building, and we need to take care of it. We need to show that we're excited about it and that we're appreciative of it, and be planting, I don't know what kind of flowers it is, maybe it's petunias or daisies or whatever it is that you're doing around the building, and planting things like that, and putting in your time and effort into this building, just like your relationship with God requires you putting in time and effort with it. So if you want to be excited about church, do you want to be excited about your church? I hope so. I hope you are excited about church. Do you want to be excited? Thank you. Do you want to be excited about your relationship with God? And I hope you're already excited about your relationship with God, but you're not going to be excited about either unless you're excited about God himself. And how do we get excited about God? How do you get in on some of this excitement? Well, the whole point of this series called Yahweh is just diving into the holiness of God. And that is something that is exciting when you start studying who God is and you realize his holiness and what that holiness means, that he's set apart, that he's set above, that he is different than anything else, that he's different than anyone else, that he's set above anything and everyone. And you start realizing exactly what all that means, and that's something you start getting a little bit excited about who God is when you see that. And one of the things that is exciting about God is his power, his authority, his sovereignty. That's what we're talking about today. Another thank you I wanted to give you was for Wednesday night. Who all was here Wednesday night? I'll tell you, that was a lot of fun, wasn't it? Everybody stay dry? Did anybody have a dry spot on them? No, it was wet. It was nasty. But we had a lot of people here, and it was great, and it was a lot of fun. Why do we do that? Well, because we're excited about our church, because we're excited about our relationship with God, and we want to share that excitement with other people. We want them to be excited about God, and we want to share this excitement with our community, and we want them. Well, what's our vision? Help disconnected people connect with God. We want everyone to have this connection with God. We want them to have the connection with this church the way that we do because we're excited about it. And one of the things that's so exciting is God's sovereignty. this is the first time we've ever done Candyland, and we didn't know how it was going to go. We didn't know we were going to have anybody. We didn't know we were going to have anybody to come and work on it, but we did. We had a lot of people showed up and put a lot of time into it. We didn't know if we were going to have any guests come, but we did. Right? We had a lot, and I was looking at the weather that morning, and it was just pouring down rain. You look at the Weather Channel app, and it shows 90% chance of rain all day and storms, and it's just going to be miserable. And I just had to pray. God, I don't know. I don't know how this is going to work. I don't know if anybody's going to show up, and I don't know what's going to happen. And all we could do was do what we could, and then pray, because after that, it's out of our hands. Right? We can't control the weather. There's a lot of things in life that we can't control. Time. What happened last night about 2 o'clock or this morning? We adjusted our time and we fell back. We set our clocks back, but all we did was manipulate a clock. We have no power over time. You have no power over the time that you have here on this earth. You have no power to adjust time or change time. You can change a clock. That's all we can do, but we can't stop time. We're kind of bound by time. You only have a limited amount of time on this earth. So time is one of the things that's outside of our control. It's outside of our authority, but it's not outside God's. God is the creator of time, and he's not bound by time. Time did not exist until God created it. So get this out. And as I was talking about a while ago, weather. We can plan all kinds of events, and we can do all kinds of things. And we can hope for the best, but that's about all we can do, right? It's one thing that makes me nervous about outdoor events is the weather, because you've got no control over it. But we know who does, right? We know who controls the clouds and who controls the sun and the rain and the wind and the storms and the hurricanes and the tornadoes or whatever it is. We know who has authority and all power over these things. And that's God. And that's one of the things that's so exciting about God. And I talked to Jared about this a couple weeks ago. I love God, period. But I really like getting some feedback up here. I really like the Old Testament. I like studying about the Old Testament God. But you know what? He's the same God today that he was 2,000, 3,000, 4,000, 5,000 years ago. But I love reading the stories in the Old Testament about God and God's power and God's authority over all things. And it's just amazing to me. But, when we're talking about Candyland, I prayed. That's all I could do is pray, God, I pray for good weather. I pray that things go well. And it stormed all day long. And I looked at it, and it wasn't getting any better. But I looked on Facebook at our ad that we put out there, the event that we created. And I started seeing people getting interested in it. And the numbers started climbing. Those who were responding to it, those who were going to, who were interested in it or who were going, the numbers just kept climbing all day, climbing. The more it rained, the higher the numbers went. I'm like, oh my. God's not stopping the rain, but I think it's going to work out in our favor because people began looking for another place to go. So another alternative, because it was obvious trick-or-treating was going to get washed out. So I just sit back and think, God, and you are amazing. We wanted good weather, but God said, no, you don't need good weather. You need some bad weather. So people they'll need another alternative, and they'll come out. So God gave us terrible weather. It was rotten. It was nasty. We were out here trying to set it up. The wind was blowing, and it was pouring down rain. But just as we got really setting it up, the wind stopped, the rain stopped. And by the time we were making our last setup with the bubblegum arches down here, the wind had stopped. And the rain had stopped. And we were setting it up and trying to put it, and I looked up, and the traffic was lined up to the street. It wasn't even time to begin yet, and traffic was lined up to the street. And if you remember last Sunday, I prayed for a traffic jam. I don't know what was going on out there in Sawdust, but I know our parking lot from the Bubblegum Boulevard to Sawdust was packed, and there were people trying to get in. God's amazing, and I see God's sovereignty and God's authority and God's power over simple things like that. But it's simple to God. It's not simple to us to have control over the weather, have control over your life, have control over all things. That's something to get excited about God. We go back to Isaiah chapter 6, where we kind of started this series a couple weeks ago. And here's the angels. And these are the seraphim. It's the ones that you saw them, you would literally wet your pants if you looked up and saw one hovering above you today, because they would be that scary to us. And we don't know how many of them there are in heaven. There's thousands and thousands and millions of angels. And here's what they're crying all day long. Holy, holy, holy is the Lord of hosts. Not just holy, but holy, holy, holy. And as I said a couple weeks ago, anytime you see something repeated 3 times, that's important. That's big. And here's what the angels are saying. And what do they see that we don't see? They see God's holiness. They see his power. They see all the things that we've talked about the last 2 weeks. But it's not just the angels. You know, that's not just the angels that are up there singing and praising God. Here and you go to Revelation chapter 15, you see the saints. If you read the beginning of the chapter, he's talking about the saints who have overcome the beast and the false prophet and over the tribulation, the end time, and overcome, the world not through their own power, but through the power of Jesus. And they're in heaven. And this very well may be a picture of y'all and me. This may be us. John, when he saw this in Revelation, he might have been looking at us because he's looking into the future. It might have very well been us that he saw doing this, what we see in verse 3. And he says, and they, talking about this throng of people, and they sang the song of Moses, the bondservant of God, and the song of the Lamb, saying, great and marvelous are your works, O Lord God the Almighty. I want you to really focus in on those words. Great and marvelous are your works, O Lord God the Almighty, the Almighty, the all-powerful, the all-sovereign God, the one who has control and authority over all things. This is what they're singing and who they're singing praises to. But what are they singing again? Right up there at the top, the Song of Moses. Wow. And when you read that, it's like, that's kind of odd. Why are they singing the Song of Moses? If you look back in Scripture, there's at least 3 instances where Moses sang a song. I can't do this, but Moses is apparently pretty good at it, and David good at it, just coming up with a song right off the top of his head and just start singing a song of praise to God. And like I said, there's 3 times that it's recorded that Moses did that. And the one in particular I want you to look at is in, let me finish this. Here's what they were singing. Who will not fear, O Lord, and glorify your name? For you alone are holy. You alone are set above. You alone are set apart. You alone are holy, is what they're saying. What they're saying is our God is sovereign over all principalities, over all rulers of the earth. This is the song that they're singing. This is the Song of Moses. That's what I want to go back and look at. This happened, if you remember the story, when God sends Moses back to Egypt. Now, I want you to go back. I'm going to get you my people. And through all of that happened, all through the book of Exodus, and you see Moses going to Pharaoh, and though he didn't want to. Here's the principality, the ruler of the world at the moment. The Egyptian army, the Egyptian Pharaoh, the king, strongest, most powerful man, strongest principality on the earth here. And he's going back to Pharaoh. He's saying, God says, let my people go. And Pharaoh, of course, says, no. And then you see the 10 plagues that happen, where God is showing his authority and his sovereignty and his power over all of creation, over all other gods, over nature itself, and over everything. God is showing Pharaoh, God is showing the world his authority. God is showing the world his sovereignty. But it wasn't enough for Pharaoh because God wasn't done yet. And he showed his authority over death, even with the 10th plague. Over who lives and over who dies. He shows his authority over that. And, finally, Pharaoh lets them go. And they go and they get stopped by the Red Sea. And they've got the Red Sea in front of them, and they've got Pharaoh's army coming up behind them. And they think, all is lost. We're done for. And God says, no, you're not. I've done this for a purpose. I wanted the world to see this, because this is going to be like the shot heard around the world. They may not have heard about the 10 plagues, but the world is going to hear about what I'm about to do right now. And he says, Moses, reach out your staff over the waters. And Moses is like, okay, holds the staff out of the water, and the Red Sea splits. And we're not talking knee-deep water. We're talking the Red Sea. We're talking deep water, enough to drown the most powerful army on the planet, along with their horses. And God parts the Red Sea, and Israel walks across on dry land, on dry ground. And when they do, and the Egyptian army comes behind them, pursuing them, God collapses the Red Sea on top of them and wipes out the most powerful army in the world. Reduces them to nothing but floating bodies in the water. And that's when Moses sings this first song that's recorded, the Song of Moses. He comes up off the banks of the Red Sea. He starts walking away, and he starts singing this song. And I just have 2 or 3 verses of it here. He says, and in the greatness of your excellence, you overthrow those who rise up against you. And then go to verse 11. Who is like you among the gods, O Lord? Here's that word, Lord again. Jehovah, where we get it's Yahweh. the Hebrew word, is translated into Jehovah, the proper name of God, his real name. Who is like you, majestic in holiness, awesome in praises, working wonders. Our God is sovereign over all principalities. And that's just a song that Moses was singing. And we're going to be singing that song or a song like it when we get to heaven one day. And we're going to be singing praises to God for his holiness because of his sovereignty over all powers and over all principalities. Two other stories I want to share with you just quickly this morning. I said I love the Old Testament because it's full of just some amazing stories. And it's just such exciting and interesting reading. But God is sovereign over all principalities, but God is also sovereign over all powers. And we want you to look at, we go to Isaiah, skip ahead again to verse 37. And here's Hezekiah saying a prayer, but I want to give you some backstory here. Hezekiah is saying this prayer. He's the king over Israel, and they have been surrounded. They have been surrounded, or Judah actually, they've been surrounded by the Assyrian army. See, the Assyrian army has come in, and they have conquered Israel, the northern kingdom. And they've led them off, and they've slaughtered Israel, and they've carted them off back to Assyria and scattered them all over the world and left them in ruins. And now they've decided they're going to come down, and they're going to do the same thing to Judah. And they're surrounded the city. They've seized it, and they're going to slaughter the people. They're going to cart them off into captivity and make slaves out of them or do whatever they want to do with them. And they're surrounded by the most powerful army on the planet now is Assyria, and they're surrounded by it. And certain death is on its way, and things are getting bad, and they don't have anything to eat. They don't have anything to drink. They're starting to actually eat their own children. Things are getting bad, and they're about to be slaughtered. And then you've got the leader of the Assyrian army comes to Hezekiah. He comes to the walls, and he looks up, and there's people, Israelites, up on the wall, and Sennacherib is his name, and he starts just making these threats against God and against God's people, and you see his arrogance and all things, and he says, who are you going to pray to? Is your God going to help you? Has any of the gods of the other lands, have they helped them any? Has their God saved them? What makes you think your God's going to be any different? Your God's not going to be able to save you any more than any of the other gods have been able to save them. We're going to make ruins out of you and your city, and there's nothing you nor your God can do about it. And these are the threats and the arrogance of Sennacherib. He's working for a king of Assyria. So Hezekiah rips his clothes, and he goes up, and he prays this prayer to God. He said, "Oh Lord," again, there's that word, Yahweh again. "Oh Yahweh, Jehovah, O Lord of hosts, the God of Israel, who is enthroned above the cherubim. You are God, you alone, of all the kingdoms of the earth. You have made heaven and earth. Now, O Lord our God, deliver us from his hand, that all the kingdoms of the earth may know that you alone, Lord, are God." We want the whole world to see what you're about to do. Make it known throughout the world that you alone, Lord, are God. There's Hezekiah's prayer, and God responds, and God replies, and he sends a message to Sennacherib. He said, "I've heard you, man. I've heard what you're saying. You're talking smack." And he says, "Man, I know where you live. I know when you rise up. I know when you lay down. I know every move you make. I know every word you say and every thought you have. I hold your very life in my hand," is what he's saying to him. "And I'm fixing to show you who this God is that you think so little of. That I'm not like any other God that you've ever messed with before. I'm about to show you what's going to happen." And here's God's response. "Then the angel of the Lord went out and struck 185,000 in the camp of the Assyrians. And when men arose early in the morning, behold, all of those were dead." See, he didn't kill everybody. He just killed most of them. He left a few for witnesses so they could go back and tell the world what just happened. I don't know, man. I woke up. We were surrounded. We had seized the city. We were around it. We were about to take over the city. I woke up the next morning and everybody was dead. I mean, they were all dead. 185,000. There wasn't a fight. There wasn't a skirmish. There wasn't an argument. There wasn't a sickness. There wasn't anything going on. But I woke up this morning. Went to bed last night. Everybody was good, ready to go fight the next morning. Woke up in the morning, and they were all dead. 185,000 of them were dead for no reason. No reason at all. And they skip town. The few that are left, they head back, and they get out of there. And it goes back and reports what has just happened. And reports again, just like crossing the Red Sea, goes around the world of what just happened, of what Israel's God had just done. God is sovereign over all principalities. God is sovereign over all powers. Doesn't matter who you are, what you are, or what you're facing. God is sovereign over everything in your life and everything that you're going to come up against. This is the power of our God. And as you keep hearing over and over and over, who is like our God? No one. No one is like you. Our God is sovereign. Here's another thing. Another one of my favorite stories in the Old Testament. Our God is sovereign over all plans. Any plans that you may have, any plans that those around you may have for you. Doesn't matter what kind of plans that you're making. Doesn't matter what kind of plans someone else is making against you. God is sovereign over those plans. You know, we're warned in James chapter 4. Don't go saying that you're gonna go on such and such time. You're gonna go to such and such place, and you're gonna do such and such a thing. Don't do that. You know why? Because you don't know what's going to happen tomorrow. You don't have any authority over tomorrow. You don't have any authority or power over what's going to happen to you tomorrow. You don't know what's going to happen 5 minutes from now, much less next week. So don't be making plans without consulting God first, at least. He said, if the Lord wills, I'm going to do this, because only He knows. Only He knows if your plans are going to be able to work out. And you can make all the plans you want, but God and God alone is sovereign over those plans. Here's a story. We go to 2 Kings chapter 6. Here's a story of Elisha. My favorite prophet in the Old Testament because he was bald. And one of my favorite stories was when it's not this story, but I just got to share this with you. When they're making fun of the bald prophet, saying, hey, Baldy, basically is what they were saying. And these group of young boys, young men, are making fun of him and harassing Elisha and because he's bald. And you know what he does? He calls bears down out of the woods, out of the mountains, and he comes and he eats them all. And that's my favorite story of the entire Bible, I think. I mean, that's right up there with the resurrection as far as I'm concerned. That's good stuff when he calls out bears to eat the ones made. So don't make fun of me. I don't think God likes me as much as Elisha, but I'll still pray. It may not happen. and I'll call for some bears. But anyway, here's another thing that Elisha's facing. A little more serious than someone making fun of him. But here's the story that's going on. When I said that God is sovereign over all plans, you see, there was another army called the Arameans, and they had devised this scheme against the armies of Israel. And they had made camp in this location, and they were sitting kind of around maybe a hill or a mountain or wherever they were, but they were setting up an ambush for Israel's army. Israel's army is going to be coming through there, and they'd set up on both sides, and they were ready just to pounce on them and wipe out the army of Israel. Well, obviously, being God's people, God tells Elisha. Elisha goes and tells Israel and says, don't go that way. You don't want to do that. The Arameans have set up an ambush for you, so they go a different way. Well, this infuriates the Aramean king. I mean, he is furious. And he says, we've got a traitor in the midst. Who's the mole? Who's leaked out the information? And his advisors came to him and says, it wasn't any of us. It was that Elisha guy, the prophet of God. He's the one that ruined your plans. He's the one that foiled your plans. You need to take it up with him. So the king, the Aramean king, says, okay, let's go find this Elisha guy. And let's get him out of the picture because I'm tired of him messing up our plans. So he gathers his army. And the Bible doesn't tell us how many is in his army, but he says it's a great number, a huge number. And he goes, and Elisha's in this city called Dothan. I don't know how big of a city it is, but anyway, the army that the Arameans sent was big enough to surround the city. So we're talking thousands and thousands of soldiers that have surrounded the city, and they're wanting Elisha. And Elisha has a servant, and he looks out and he sees that the city is surrounded. And like a normal person, he kind of freaks out and he says, Elisha, what are we going to do? We're dead. What are we going to do, Elisha? And Elisha said, man, don't worry about it. Those who are with us are greater than those who are against us. And then the servant's like, man, I don't think you can count because you need to look out the door because we're surrounded and we ain't got nowhere to go. And Elisha says this prayer. And then Elisha prayed and said, oh, Lord, I pray, open his eyes that he may see. And the Lord opened the servant's eyes and he saw. And behold, the mountain was full of horses and chariots of fire all around Elisha. Could you imagine that? Elisha says, just hold up a second. God, open his eyes. Let him see. Let him see what's really there. And he opens his eyes, and the mountains and the hills and all around the city, and the sky is full. Can you imagine that sight? Can you imagine the sight of chariots that are on fire and horses? I can imagine them just breathing smoke out their nostrils, and the chariots are flaming. There's angels standing there, probably has some flaming swords. And it was probably a scary, scary sight. At least it would have been for the other army. But this is what Elisha is seeing. He says, look, you've got nothing to worry about. We've got a host of angels riding chariots that are on fire that are going to do a fighting for us. You don't have anything to worry about. And the story goes on. It said, uh, Elisha lifted up this prayer, and he asked God to strike him with blindness. When they came down to him, Elisha prayed to the Lord and said, strike this people with blindness, I pray. So he struck them with blindness according to the word of Elisha. See, God's sovereign over pretty much everything, right? You know, not pretty much everything, but everything. Over your life, over your health, over your vision, over whatever it is, God is sovereign over your life. God is sovereign over these people's sight. All of them, thousands of them, struck blind all at once. How did they explain that? Well, they couldn't. So they come to Elisha. If you read on, then Elisha said to them, this is not the way, nor is this the city. Follow me, and I will bring you to the man whom you seek. And he brought them to Samaria. I think of Elisha kind of pulled this Jedi trick. This is not the way. I am not the man that you're looking for. Let me take you to the one that you are looking for. Any Star Wars fans here? They know what I'm talking about? Okay. You're too afraid to raise your hand, aren't you? But I see it in your face. So he pulls this little trick on them. I'm not who you're looking for. This is not the right city. But I'll take you to the guy. And they're like, okay. I don't know why they agreed to this. They're blind. All of them struck blind. But they agreed to it for whatever reason. And Elisha led them away. And he took them right to the heart of their capital city, Samaria, where the king and where the biggest army Israel had, led them right into the middle of them, into a trap, and opened their eyes. And they were surrounded. And the king of Israel said, what do we need to do? Let's kill them. And Elisha said, no, don't kill them. They've had enough for today, basically. Give them some food. Let's throw a party for them and send them home. They know now that the God that we serve, that our God is sovereign, that our God is all-powerful, that our God is the one and true God, because only God can do what has just done, what's just happened. They know. Let them go back and report it to the rest of the world, because our God is sovereign. He's sovereign over all principalities. He's sovereign over all powers. He's sovereign over all plans. See, they had big plans for Israel. They had big plans for Elijah. And you know, and the world's got big plans for you. Satan's got big plans for you. But God is sovereign over all those plans. It doesn't matter. And He's sovereign over your plans. He's sovereign over every aspect of your life. God has authority and God has control. He may not always exercise it, but He has authority. He gives you also free will to do what you want to go where you want to say what you want to. He gives you that free will. But know that any given time, God can revoke that. God has authority over your life, over whether you can take the next breath or whether you live 10 years, 50 years, 100 years. God has complete authority and control over everything that you do and every plan that you're going to make. You see, it's hard to be excited. See, that's a big God. That's a sovereign God that can do that. No small God can do that. You see, it's hard to be excited about a small God, isn't it? It would be hard to be excited about a God who has no authority, who has no control, who has no power, who can't do anything. That's a God to not get excited about at all. But we don't serve a small God. We serve a sovereign God who is powerful and sovereign and has authority and control over all things and over all people and over all plans and over all powers and over the universe itself. Our God is sovereign. So let me ask you a question. What do you, or yo, what do you have to fear? Little typo there. If God is sovereign, what do you have to fear? What power is rising up against you? What authority is over you? What principality? What problem are you facing? If God is sovereign, what do you have to fear? What power or what problem? What obstacles in your path right now that you have to fear? If God has authority over all things and over all people and over all plans, what do you have to be afraid of? Our God is sovereign. The God I serve, because I have a relationship with Him, I can trust Him. I know that He has power over any harm that somebody wants to do to me. I have a sovereign God who has authority and power over that. And I don't have to worry. And I don't have to fret over it and be anxious and lose sleep night after night and night, because my God is sovereign. And that's something to get excited about. All right, God, here's a verse for you. Isaiah 54:17. No weapon that is formed against you will prosper, and every tongue that accuses you in judgment you will condemn. This is the heritage of the servants of the Lord, and their vindication is from me, declares the Lord. No weapon that is formed against you will prosper. If God is sovereign, then how should you respond to him? There's your big question. If God is sovereign, if he has complete authority over your life and over your eternity and over your health and over your finances and over your plans and over whatever you're doing, how do you respond to that kind of God? Let me share a verse with you here. We go to Romans chapter 1, and this describes a lot of people these days. Did you know that? It may describe some people here in this room. For even though they knew God, they did not honor him as God or give thanks, but they became futile in their speculations, and their foolish heart was darkened. You see, they know God. They know who God is. They just don't honor him as God. To honor him as God is to recognize his sovereignty and his power and his authority over your life, over your eternity, over everything about you. God is sovereign over it. How do you respond to God? How do you respond to that kind of God? You respond to that kind of God in worship. You respond to that kind of God in praise, in awe, in admiration. If you would stand with me this morning.